really great to have you with us. We're going to be doing today another In Conversation With, which is an opportunity for us to ask people a couple of questions about God and their church life and experts in their field. It's such a privilege to have you with us. Gemma, for those of you that don't know, is the rector in the parish of Cove, was assistant pastor at Soul Survivor Watford, trained at London School of Theology, St Mellitus and various other places, took curacy in St Albans Diocese and is doing a PhD in what I think is called looking into faith and development of discipleship in young adults.
I'm looking at faith formation in emerging adults, so those that are 18 to 29. Yeah.
Fantastic. So just to kick us off, Gemma, how have you been this year?
Yeah, I mean, no one really, I saw that thing on Facebook, isn't it? Whoever said in 2015, this is where I see myself in 5 years' time has clearly got it wrong. And I don't think any of us saw 2020 anywhere like it has been. And on the one hand, it feels like we've been, like March feels like another world ago, like just a completely different existence. And on the other hand, it's kind of, where has 2020 gone? I can't believe we're in October. So yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm leaving 2020, I think, with completely different skills than what I started with. I think lockdown help us to work out just how to do life and ministry in a completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you say about life and ministry, some people will know what it means to be a rector, but others may not. Can you just explain what you're doing in Cove?
Sure. So basically, a rector is like a vicar. It has a different title, but ultimately it's the same job. So in Cove, so Cove's in Farnborough. Cove, the parish that I'm in, is about a third of Farnborough. We're on the last census, it was about 21,000 people, but there's been some growth since then, so we're probably nearer 23, 24, 25,000 people. We go from the town centre, including most of the airport. Obviously, Farnborough is a home of flying, so that's part of what we are. We have a business park, a tech park, 9 schools, which is massive, so loads of residential area, new housing development. So that's kind of what our parish looks like, and I'm the rector, so I oversee 2 churches. When I arrived, there were 3. We joined 2 together and relaunched a new church for this kind of new missional opportunity in that time. So yeah, it's like a vicar, but with a couple of buildings. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you say that it looks quite different at the moment. What does church life look like for you over there?
Yeah, so, and it's looked different through the seasons of lockdown. So we went into lockdown, and it was just so quick, wasn't it? So we're kind of, COVID, it's hitting the headlines, then we might go into lockdown, then suddenly we can't do church. And we prepared a little bit for the first week by recording on YouTube. We've always used a little bit of social media here, so we'd record with like a morning prayer and a little reflection just in case, which turned out to be quite important. So we did that for week 1, and then it became quite apparent this wasn't going to be a couple of weeks. And the Lord just, it's just in the way, you pray for people to come and join your church, you pray for people to meet Jesus. But in the end of December 2019, we have a new couple join our church. Just so happens, didn't even cross my mind at the time, you come, tell me a little bit about yourself, what do you do for a living? Just so happens he was a video editor. Again, just one of those things that you just note. Suddenly we find ourselves in March and we can't do services. So we started to video edit, and through that have developed a video editing team. So initially we have 4 Sunday morning congregations of different styles. So we just initially started with 1 service, which is what we've continued with, that we do on a Sunday morning. Where everyone's sending different bits in and that we play live. Then we normally have a midweek communion, so we started to do a midweek reflection as well online. Then we started to do something for our children online as well. And then, I don't know if you saw the Tier Fund report, but those in their 20s and 30s particularly were engaging with online church. A third of people in their 20s and 30s, that not a third of Christians, a third of people in their 20s and 30s in Britain had watched an online service. And the demographics of our area are heavily weighted of young families under 44s. So then during lockdown, we also launched an evening kind of expression for 20s and 30s, particularly because because of the missional opportunities that we were being given. Then we get to the summer and we keep doing that, but we're also opening our buildings. So we've got hybrid church, we've got church happening in the building and church happening online. And now we're having conversations about, should we start to live stream, because this is not going away. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it's been a very exciting year in lots of ways, but obviously a very challenging year. Thinking about church in general, because it's sort of evolved for us all into this really different thing that we're still trying to work out. What do you think has been the most encouraging things from the church in this season that it's been learning or transforming in?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that spring to mind. I think in terms of the first stage of lockdown, we learnt to look out for each other. And I think what's been lovely is everyone was really worried about those who don't have the internet. So in our congregation, that's 30 people that don't have the internet, that aren't able to access things. And so straight away, we've got a list of people who are calling those. We're writing to them. And what's lovely is they're probably at that point, to be honest, getting more attention and support than maybe if we were busy with the rest of our lives. So that was really good. And seeing us look out for each other in a different way and learn to press into faith at home as well. And that's challenging and that's frustrating, because we're created for community. I think in this season, as we're a little bit back in the building, we're in a season of learning about worship again. And a song that that's come to me and that a couple of people have mentioned to me is that, Matt Redman's song When the Music Fades, and obviously Soul Survivor been in my background, a song I know the rich heritage from. But just I think there's beautiful moments on a Sunday morning where we've got two songs and someone is singing and we're worshipping without singing. And what's going on in that time is actually really special, because we're having to focus maybe on listening to the words, putting our hands out, clapping, doing what we're worshipping in a different way. And I'm interested to see what the Lord does in the church, not just our church, the church in this country, as we're all trying to figure that out as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an exciting time. And you mentioned the word faith at home. So for St. Mark's, very similar to what you've shared, partly in the building. Some people are coming back, some people are still watching online, and a variety of people having all sorts of experiences of church. But spinning off your word that you said about faith at home, so many people are having to, if you like, keep their faith strong on the day-to-day basis without the things that they normally use. And they're a little bit tired, a little bit weary. Is there any encouragement you might give to people that are thinking, I really want my faith to be super ignited in this weird season? How would you encourage those people in that position?
Yeah, I think one thing I realised early on, which is getting better in lockdown, is just how much I love being in the car. And I wasn't, because in the car, you can put worship on, you can sing really loudly, you listen to a podcast, that kind of stuff. And so I started running again. It's one thing that I think has been really helpful, to have that space, because your home now isn't just your home, is it? Your home has been your home if you've got children, as we do. It's been your home school. It's also been your work area and everything. So, and sometimes I think to feel that we can have those spaces with God, I know that Pete Gregg talks about having a chair, and it's great to have a chair, but I think sometimes when we go to church, we go to a church meeting, something about our embodiment of being in a different place can just set us up in a different mindset. So I found that I've tried to run quite a bit with a podcast on or some worship on, to be like, there's no distractions now. I can just focus on this. I'm not thinking there's schoolwork to be done, there's a dinner to cook, oh, I haven't done the washing, I should just send that email. So I think just being in a different place to be able to do that. There's been some wonderful resources. I think this is where the church has really stepped up for lots of different things that you can listen to online. And I've been encouraged actually by watching other church services, which initially was to see how are they trying to figure this out, but then has become, actually this is a great way for me to be fed. And when you're this, when you're clergy on a Sunday morning, you're in your own context, you don't get as much opportunity to hear other sermons and to do other things and to see what other churches are like, when now we're able to do that. So I think it's pressing in, and what everyone says in this situation, the routine is key, isn't it?
Yeah.
So keeping that, what does that look like? When do I spend time with God? When do we need a routine to do the other stuff, like the switching off and the Sabbath stuff, but also that, keeping that maintain thing. So during homeschooling, what we started with our kids, and we've not been brilliant since they've been back at school, but in the morning before we started homeschooling, we had half an hour of like family Bible reading and prayer, and we went through the whole Bible, the whole children's Bible together, and just trying to establish what does that look like.
No, absolutely. It's really encouraging. And just want to slightly shift focus to people who in lots of different churches that are really struggling with the guidance. So you've got some debates about face covering, you've got debates about social distancing and how long is it going on for. And that, like you said, so much of church is that socializing afterwards, checking in, we can tolerate a really bad sermon if we can go and chat to someone afterwards. So there's a weariness but a heart to love. What would you say to people that are actually just finding it really difficult and are feeling a bit weary, that's making them lose motivation at the moment? So weariness, I think, have you got thoughts on?
This week I've been reflecting a lot and reading Isaiah 40, comfort your people of Israel, and at the end it talks about how those that wait on the Lord will renew their strength. And I think I find there's a weariness at this time of year anyway, when the clock starts to go back, and we feel it more acutely now, particularly with the long stretch of lockdown potentially ahead of us. So I think it's enjoying the small things. There's a wonderful prayer which I can't remember, but our Ordinan found it, about the sacrament of wearing a mask, and just putting, as you put it on, you think about God using your mouth. As you put it behind your ears, you think about listening to God, and just allowing that moment to say, God, speak to me every time I put this on, almost like a reminder, a routine thing. But also, I am my brother's keeper, aren't I? That is, me wearing a mask isn't really about protecting me. It's about the way that I'm showing love to my brothers and sisters in the church and outside the church at this time. The way that I'm showing love to people is not by giving them a hug, is not by shaking their hands, because that's actually protecting them, even though it's hard, actually, because that would be a natural response. And I think you come to church on a Sunday, you see someone, you realise, having coffee, I can only chat, or not coffee for us, we're hanging around outside having a chat with up to 6 people before we go home, and then you can't say hello to someone else, and that's difficult. But the phone has suddenly become important again, and calling people. I've also taken up, as part of actually my discipline for my quiet time, is a couple of times a week I just pray and ask God who I should write to, and I just write to someone in the congregation, just a little card or something, and just because I want to feel that I can communicate in other ways. And sometimes you do get a better conversation on the phone than you do after church. We have a Zoom coffee meeting at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, just for people to check in, and they can go to the service and then come back and do that if they want to. But it's not the same, and let's not pretend it is the same. And I think it helps us realize the value of church. At the beginning of lockdown, there was lots of excitement, wasn't there? Maybe this is what church is going to look like. And I think we realized quite quickly we actually do want human interaction, to hear other people sing. So to know it's the short term, I think under God nothing is wasted. And what we learn in this time, whether that's a quietness in prayer, whether that's a depth in worship, whether that's learning to love even when we can't do the small talk and the other stuff. I think that's really key. The thing that I miss the most isn't the in-depth conversations, actually. It isn't because you have them. You call someone on Zoom to have those. You pick up the phone to have those. It's the chance 2 or 3 minute conversations with someone at a toddler group that I'm probably not going to pick up the phone and ring because it'd be weird, or the people that I might see at my daughter's ballet lesson, or those kind of conversations that there's not enough relationship for you to pursue them, but you miss having that interaction. And I think church is the hubbub of that kind of conversation, isn't it? Where people you see just on a Sunday for a small glance of a chat. But the joy of the church, unlike other social institutions, is because we are already family. Like, that's what Jesus says that we are. I think you do have a permission that I've only spoken to you twice, but I could probably give you a call, and I think we need to press into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that encouragement that you've got the whole week to take that opportunity. So we've been thinking and praying this week about encouraging people that when you're at the church service, if there's someone you want to chat to, think about when you could chat to them in the week and ask for that prompting of God. And I think what's lovely about what you're saying is that sort of sense that if God can use the things that are difficult, can prune us and can change us, and is in it. You've expressed how God provided a video editor when you needed it most, and it's so exciting to see how God is breaking into this and doing something really exciting and new and strengthening us in that suffering. So moving a little bit towards suffering in your history, but do please choose what is appropriate for you. But can you give an example of where God has taken something hard in your life and has used it for good, or has helped you in a moment of suffering?
Yeah, sure. Oh, my phone is ringing. Didn't think to turn that off, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, a moment that's suffering that God has used it for good. Yeah, they just think of that Joseph, the line from Genesis on that. Yeah. There's lots that probably it's hard to think of. I would say for me, probably the biggest one is, I came to faith in my teens. My parents weren't and still aren't Christians and didn't respond to that really very well. And I think that's probably, although that was difficult, it helped me to press into the church family. And I think for me, the church has been and always will be family. And because it had to be when I was a teenager. And because obviously people of faith, we have a shared worldview, don't we? And so you naturally become closer to the people in the church because they understand, they think in the way that you think, they want to have the same values of life. And although that difficult situation meant that naturally meant that I probably feels that maybe me and my wider family didn't understand each other as much, it meant that I clung on to the church. And I think that was probably a really helpful thing in that time as I look back and I think about that, actually.
No, it's great. And I think it's great, that sort of picture of family, because you're with family through thick and thin, through the good times and the bad times and the highs and lows, and we're getting everyone through this season. I'm very interested also in how you've shared about that there's such opportunities, missional opportunities to expand our family. How has that looked for you where you are, and what encouragement would you give to churches to look out, enlarge our tent, if you like, to the world around us?
I think what we need at this moment in society is hope, isn't it? And what the church has is hope. That's what we're about. They also think we've realised that we can pursue all these wonderful things, money, great careers, everything else, but that isn't going to satisfy us. And I think there's almost been a reset button that has been pressed where we suddenly start to think, what does really matter? Do I really want to be commuting 3 hours a day doing a job where I never see my family? It's probably come up suddenly when you're in lockdown with them all the time and you actually see in front of you what you're really missing. And actually a hope and an answer for the future that the church has, and a sense of peace, because at the moment so many people are anxious. So to be able to share about that, our church, like every other church, you think people are watching us online that are not coming on a Sunday, and that's great. The statistics are good for that. Statistics are slightly scary across the nation as well for those that are in a church that are not watching anything. So I think we need to hold that statistic with humility as well. But for us, I have had conversations with people who have found us online and now are having conversations about coming into church. And some of those conversations along the lines of, actually, this does make you reassess life. And so I think that is important. The statistic from the Tiffin research of lots of young adults watching services I think is true as well, because there's an intrigue. It's not, there's a sense of, is there a hope? Is there a God that is allowing this to happen? What I've been focusing on actually is not so much what's happening in the moment in front of us, although I think it's important that we focus on that, but actually what is the role of the church when we come out of this?
Yeah.
And because we'll have a society that's trying to rebuild in many ways and look for answers. So one of the things that we're doing here is we're developing a bereavement course for those who, when they come out, who have been bereaved by the obvious situation of losing someone in COVID, or the situation of people who maybe have lost someone that was nothing to do with COVID, but because of the COVID guidelines, they weren't able to say goodbye, they weren't able to visit them, or those that have lost their job, or we know that relationship breakdown is much higher at the moment. So we're trying to make sure we've got something in place to be the answer for when people come out. We've put a lot of effort into our Time to Remember service for those who have lost people as well, which will be happening in November. We do a support group for those who've got who are vulnerable and have mental health concerns, and we've run that online, and I'm very aware that when we come back to be able to do that in the building again, that was an opportunity. We all know statistics about mental health, we've seen it on the news. How can we respond to that? And I'm trying to have some, like, a healthy focus on the now, but a good eye on the future, because right now we can't be in a place where we can do this big alpha course and everyone can come to church, they can come online, they can do that kind of thing. But we will at some point want to rebuild a society again, and there'll be a longing for community, a longing for answers, and a longing for comfort. And this is where the church, this is our gospel, isn't it? So how do we get to share that, and trying not to be so taken up with the day that we don't think about the vision for the future?
No, I think it's extremely powerful what you're saying, because it's a sense of we've been working out our return to church in terms of physical, but also that restoration of how do we heal, how do we process, how do we reflect what we have come from, going through and anticipating what's coming. And I think this is where the church can make a radical difference in also being there for the long term, that we're there all the way along. And just really poking that a little bit more. One of the things that we've been reflecting on as a leadership team is obviously people's losses, but we also reflected, similar to what you're saying, about people's loss of identity and purpose, because so many people had so many roles in church that are not there. So there's a sense of, well, is God using me anymore? And there's an identity thing. People who had jobs that were one way, they're struggling with the new way, and they're saying, well, this isn't what my job was, and I was okay at it before, and now I feel really bad. So what do you, and then obviously some people are losing jobs and actually feeling like, oh, well, am I worth something to the world? What would you say to people whose sort of purpose and identity is really wrestling inside of them right now?
I think this is a question that every Christian should ask themselves at some point. And I suppose you asked me earlier, what is the good that can come out of this time? And maybe this is it. Jesus asked Peter, who do you say that I am? And I think that's a question that we all have to answer at some point. And then our identity is based upon that, isn't it? Who we think Jesus is, whether we completely reject him and we live life without him, or whether we embrace and follow him, and that will affect how we live. And as our identity is based upon him, we serve in the way that he gives us at that moment in time. I think what's hard is that the rapid change in our identity. And sometimes you may have been given the Bible readings in church, you may have been given intercessions in church, but that doesn't mean until this point you had to operate a smartphone, a camera, a tripod, know how to record something and retransfer a file, when now that's actually what doing intercessions in church means. And I think that can be overwhelming, because the areas that we have served in just have to look different. I think it's holding some of that and knowing that maybe this is a season that we're resting and just receiving, and think that ministry that we served in will come back. But I think what God develops in the hidden place is what he uses for the public place. So if we think of the story of King David, so King David was a shepherd, and he was the youngest of the sons. He was out on the field. I think, how did he learn to lead people? Did he learn to lead people when he was the king? Or did he learn to lead the people when he was on the hillside and seeing the sheep wander off, seeing everyone going a slightly different way? Is that where he learned to lead people, actually? And is that the place that he learned to write songs and be on his own with God? And so if you do intercessions in church, well, you know what? now is a good time to really, you can read intercession books, you can develop that stuff. Do you lead worship? This is a time to be leading worship in your home. This is a time to be writing songs for the season that the church is in, you know, reading through things like Lamentations, which actually is really helpful in that kind of grieving process of a church, writing stuff with that. It's preaching. Let's be honest, when we're online, we might have loads less opportunities. We've gone from 4 morning services to 1. That's 1 preaching slot, not 4. So in that time, well, we can be reading, we can be developing our craft in the private place. Is it pastoral care? We can exercise that on the phone. So I think I don't think our calling has gone in this time, but it could be that God is refining us in this place to be able to prepare us. Because I don't know about you, but what we're praying for, we have a weekly early morning Zoom prayer meeting and another one in the week, and we're just praying for God to be touching people at this time, to drawing people back to him. And we want to be a church that is ready to go when we come back, because we're going to come back and it's going to be different for people in our church and people in our community. So let's not leave this as a time to be stood on standby, but the time to be growing and deepening and developing. And also, God uses our stories. And I think if we're preaching and we're saying, you know what, the last 6 months, year, however long we're in this, has been really tough. But this is what God has taught me in the tough places. That gives us a testimony and a relevance to be able to preach the person who's come through the door who feels like the last 6 months he has been really tough. So it's a
it's been so amazing seeing God's creativity, and it's interesting how many worship songs have been created from pain, and God has sort of birthed this excitement. I love that idea of actually working on the hidden place, and that God is on the move in these things, and it's just keeping that focus and identity in him. Moving just slightly towards young people and 20s to 30s, because we know that this is your area of research. Could you just remind us again that what PhD that you are currently working away on?
Sure. So I'm looking at faith formation, or discipleship, if you like, in emerging adults. So there's this new developmental theory, developmental psychologists talk about how historically we were children, then teenagers, then children, then adults, Then in the 60s, we had the birth of the teenager, we were children, then we were teenagers, then we were adults. A psychologist in around 2000 called Jeffrey Arnott spoke about how now we're really children, teenagers, emerging adults, and then established adults. And that kind of recognition that 18 to 29, they would say 18 to 25 in the States, is quite a different way of being an adult than maybe it is at 45, 55. And there are reasons for that, because we have children later, we study more, we move out of home later, lots of the things that would have happened at 24, 25, 30 years ago are now happening at 34, 35, which has created this period of instability. I'm interested in that because I've worked with that demographic for a very long time and have a real heart for it. But also, that's where a lot of the church is losing people. And I think we have a missional question there. So want to work out, instead of saying what's going wrong, I'm asking what's going right. Let's talk about how we can replicate stuff that's good rather than feel depressed about what's not good. Yeah.
Brilliant. What are some of the findings and encouragements that you would give to churches that would love to engage with that particular age group and are just not sure how?
Yeah, okay. So I think it's probably good to dispel some of the myths. Generation Y, Generation Z are teenagers to early 20s. Generation Y are probably my age, so 81, 82 born, that is down to early 20s. We're not massively rebellious. So I think there's this idea that when you're a teenager that you're rebellious and that you don't want to follow authority. That's not really true. I think there will be elements of that, and there'll be elements of stages of life that we're like that. But actually, what the biggest heart cry is someone to follow. So we have information. This is the Google generation. If I want to know anything, I can look it up on my smartphone. So we don't need information about something. What we really need is wisdom. So what's happened is, before, when kind of generations above us were older, they would share information because truth was important, or proving something was important, or science was important, and there was a world belief that science would find all the answers. So we wanted to impart information, and we were particularly not telling people what to do, because we expected if we told people what to do, they would rebel. But then what's happened is, you've had a whole generation being grown up where people haven't really told them how to flesh something out. So in a lot of 20s and 30s, it isn't a lack of desire for faith at all, actually. But I know, well, how does this work? Not is it true? The question, a heartfelt question, is it true? That's almost a sub question further down the line. It's, does this work? Is this going to make a difference in my life? So I think when working with young adults, it's important to explain, not, oh, you should have a quiet time. What does a quiet time actually look like? Or you should go to church. Well, why? What does going to church mean? What does that embody? And to not be afraid to give guidance. I think this is where generations who are older, and particularly like empty nesters, can really impact into 20s and 30s, who just want someone to advise them, well, as a Christian, how do I choose an ethical mortgage? How do I choose an ethical bank account? Because ethics is really, you know, looking after our world, that stuff is really important. So yeah, that, I think that misnomers are quite helpful to know that. There's also, this is younger people, they've not grown up rejecting faith because they don't know faith.
Yeah.
I think it's not, you know, as I do baptisms for people in their 20s, or as I'm having conversations with people who are younger, it's not like they've decided they don't want to be a Christian. They don't know. And I think that we genuinely get to share the good news for the first time. And I think that's incredibly exciting, because we're not trying to convince someone, oh, this is actually okay. Genuinely, this is news. And so I think that makes it really helpful as well. And there is a desire to find a way to live. Also, young adults want high bar. So I think there's been a tendency to, let's not pressure people. But actually, people want their life to mean something. So if I think of a lot of my friends in their 20s, early 30s, a lot of them are vegan. A lot of them live really kind of lives where they will try and not use any plastics. They're wanting to live in a way that makes a massive difference. So therefore, we need a faith that makes a massive difference. And if anything, Christianity shows us a way to live where life makes sense. So when I came to faith, what was said to me is, oh, you can be a Christian, Gemma, but just, you know, and when you are a Christian, you can still go out with your friends, you can still do all the other stuff, because God is gracious. And yes, it's true, I didn't suddenly have to start liking different types of music, and I could still wear the same clothes and all those kind of things. But actually, now it's more, when you're a Christian, there is you can live in a way where life makes sense as well. And then the big thing is community. And community is huge. And in the church, we're brilliant at being friendly. We're really good at that. We're good at being welcoming. We're good at saying hello on the door. 20s and 30s want community. So to flesh that out, what that means is, if someone who's a young adult comes to church, it's not going to be, yeah, let me take your number and send you an email. It's inviting them into coffee, inviting them into family, inviting them into home group. Home group is going to be the lifeblood for young adults, because they want people to do life with. A lot of people move for their jobs in their mid-20s. They don't have a family and support network around, and probably do want some friends they can have a Sunday lunch with and go out and spend time with. Because that's what we want in that phase of life. So, and the church is great at this, actually. We just need to think the bar will probably be a bit higher than someone coming in at 45 who's already got a ready-made friendship group, ready-made other stuff. And in fact, what's interesting is the biggest drop away, give you a bit of facts here, the biggest drop away for people in faith isn't university, it's post-university, when they come back home after being away and church is different because they're different, or when they've moved somewhere else and there's a student group in their church, but then they're not 21 and a student, but they're not 35 with a family. Where do they fit? So that's a really key age group to look at.
I mean, all of that was just so insightful and incredibly helpful. And I'm just going to pick away probably just one or two questions as we come to a close. One of the ones that struck me was, it's probably to do with the evangelist and sharing the message of God side of it, is one thing that I notice with sometimes with Christians in general is almost a apology about faith. There's almost a sense of, I want to share my faith, but I'm going to totally apologize for everything like almost. Do you think there's something about, in the hidden place, preparing our hearts to be confident in being able to say, actually, faith makes a radical difference, and here's the ways it's changed us, or having a testimony, so that when we're in those situations, we can share it? What do you think? What encouragement would you give to someone that's like, I'm desperate to share my faith, but I'm a bit worried I'm going to be coming on too strong?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it, how we're programmed for this? So if I invited a friend to the cinema on Friday and they said, oh, Gemma, I can't come, I'm really sorry, I've got something on, I'll go, oh, okay. And then they said, oh, we'll go another time. I'll say, yeah, of course we'll go another time. And I wouldn't think anything of it. If I invite them to church on Sunday and they said to me, oh, Gemma, I can't come, I've got something on, I'll think they're not interested in church. Why can't we treat it like the cinema in the same way in that conversation? If they say, oh, yeah, I'll be interested, I'll come another time, let's treat that like it's genuine, and there is an opening there. I think lots of people are asking at the moment, and one of the good things, I suppose, in COVID is that people are generally asking, how are you doing? And they genuinely mean, how are you doing? And how are you coping? Are you staying safe at this time? And I think us knowing what God is doing in us at this time, what our testimony is in this time, is helpful, because it can be just as simple as, how are you doing? What's helped you get through this little season? Well, actually, my faith has been really key, and my relationships with my church has been really helpful in this time. Well, that is a conversation opener, isn't it? And as I said, people want to know that we are good news, not just that the truth of the good news, but that we're the experience of the good news. And I think the prayer God always answers is, give me an opportunity. He always answers that. So I think let's pray for those things when we're out of lockdown that will to happen, or even to happen now, and just see what happens. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much. So the final question is, anticipating the next couple of weeks, and all sorts of parts of the country don't know what tiers they might go into. What would be the one of the primary encouragements that you would give to Christians to hold on to through the storms and the highs and lows of this next few weeks?
Yeah, I think we're all prepared now going in, aren't we? And we've done it once. And think about what helped us last time, what can we build on for the next time, and think about who are we going to connect with, pray with, work this through. One of the things we're looking to start here is prayer triplets, because as great as Zoom is, 12 people in a home group on Zoom is actually really hard. When 3 people could potentially, dependent on what tier you're in, potentially could go for a socially distanced walk outside, 3 people on FaceTime, 3 people on Zoom is a bit more feasible. So one thing that we're looking at is, how can we be intentional in the small, because we might need to be intentional in the small for a little while, alongside the church services and all of those other things. So I think it's working out, and maybe just setting some, as well as routine, some goals. If I'm in lockdown for the next 6 months, what really good devotional books could I be reading? What could I even read that with maybe my prayer triplet? What are the few things that I can do? So instead of looking at this as, this is 6 months of the same, this is 6 months where I can read 3 Christian classics. This is 6 months where I mean, the advice, the secular advice, wasn't it, was to take up a hobby, but take up something to grow more in. One of the things that I said to our congregation in the summer, which I'd read somewhere else, is write yourself a letter to read in a year. What are you learning in lockdown? What is the stuff that God is teaching you? What is the stuff that you've got in lockdown that you want to retain in the long run? Write it to yourself to read in a year's time, because what God does in this space will be so easy to forget when we're busy again. So actually, what is the stuff that we want to hold on to? Because we are experiencing quite a unique period in history at the moment, and what's the Lord doing through it, I think, is a good question.
Amazing. There is so many treasures of wisdom and encouragement. Thank you so much for giving up your time for us to receive that. Thank you. We'll say goodbye to you now, Gemma. Thank you for joining us, and we God bless all you're doing, and we shall be praying for you.